Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and KISMA. I'm Nick, and today we are talking about self-sabotage, why we do it, and what we can do about it.
Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and KISMA, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick second to hit the subscribe button in iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you want to get the inside info for this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set. Hey, KISMA.
Well, hello there.
How's it going over there?
It's good. It's been a busy, intense week and doing all the things I love to do.
Well, that sounds fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been having fun doing it?
Yeah, of course, always.
Well, that's the best part about it.
Mm-hmm.
Self-sabotage. Why are we talking about self-sabotage?
Well, I think it's an interesting thing that happens. Certainly, I hear it a lot with new clients or new students coming in. And it's also tied into that series we did on the big leap.
Yeah.
I think, the upper limiters and things of just when we humans aspire, desire, want something to be greater, better in our lives, or we want to be better and greater in our lives. And then boom, before you know, we've just created a bunch of distraction and sabotaged it. And I hear that language a lot.
The language of self-sabotage.
Yeah, like, well, am I self-sabotaging? And it's questioning too. Am I self-sabotaging? Maybe I'm sabotaging. And, so it's an interesting, term and an interesting thing that we humans do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to really dive in right off the bat is like, well, why do people get stuck into these patterns of self-sabotage?
What I see that happens a lot is there's an internal conflict, there's a value conflict, or there's a false means of protecting. So, for instance, the protection piece can be really interesting. Let's talk about money because the self-sabotage comes up a lot around money, around building a business or advancing in a job. And, we know that there are going to be these tethers to parents and grandparents and the way we grew up around our money stories. And also just the thought of, well, if I make a lot of money, then what are people going to think? And all these kinds of stories and things that we've had in our own minds or have been put into our minds and we received. And this is not, disclaimer, not about blaming parents, grandparents, anything. It's a natural occurrence, the stories that we take on. So what can happen if somebody is growing up in a family and they hear their parents talk about money and wealthy people or, oh, so-and-so just bought a new house. Who do they think they are? This sort of innocuous conversations that go on. But when they're repeated and they happen again and again, it builds sort of this limit to one's wealth, what I call their wealth container, their wealth expansion. So as they go to build a business or make more money or have a new money goal, there's that tether to, well, if I go above this limit or if I make too much money, will I still have the love of my family? What will people think of me? Will I be the person? This is all like floating around in the subconscious, everyone. We don't walk around thinking, oh, if I buy a new car, it's floating around. And so what happens is we want to protect the love that we know, the perceived love that we know. And we stop. Will self-sabotage.
I think that's a really important piece to highlight that it doesn't happen on a conscious level so often.
Not so often at all.
Yeah.
And that internal conflict, again, if one was raised in a religion, most of us have heard that money's the root of all evil. How far has that been embedded in one's self? How many times did they hear it? How many times has there been like a nuance of guilt or shame around money? All of these things pack up. We talked about a lot on energy in the last episode, but they pack up and they'll make us stop because there's like, oh yeah, I want to raise my money goals. I want to make more money. And then boom, an internal conflict. Am I being greedy? Am I doing something wrong? Will I be loved by God? All these things float around and it will disrupt us. And the self-sabotage can show up in ways that we might not even realize. Get distracted, get sick, create a dis-ease in our body, catch a cold, have an accident, drop something, break a toe. All of these things will show up because there's chaos in the field. Self-sabotage will show up as a conflict internally and then represent a conflict externally.
Right. The internal to the external. Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Really important part of that. It's a funny game that I think that we play in navigating around self-sabotage. Like, I think it's cool that people are more aware that they actually could be self-sabotaging.
Absolutely.
And asking that question. Like, that's a really interesting thing in and of itself, just being aware that exists. Because oftentimes people will just have this idea that this is what I can have. That's all I'm going to have. And that's it. They won't ever really pay attention to the patterns around that of you get too high above that having level and then you get knocked back down.
Yeah.
Or you get too low to the bottom of whatever that lowest point is for you, and then something kicks into gear to propel you up.
Right.
And so many times that happens on a level that's just so, it just seems like the world is pushing you and pulling you in those directions, and it's just happening, right? Happening to you rather than you actually playing an active role in that.
Right. And so however it shows up, it can show up in relationships, or if one is seeking a relationship and somebody comes into your life and you're like, oh, this is new, this could be amazing, but it might look different than the relationship that you witnessed in a family. Or perhaps it's saying there's a bigger part of your own connection and vulnerability that must be expressed. And that can feel scary. That can have a little internal conflict. So you might pick a fight. You might dismiss the person. Something comes up where it creates a sabotage of the relationship.
It sabotages the intimacy.
And therefore the relationship.
Yeah. The closeness, can you talk just a little bit more about that with the dynamics between the two people?
Well, if there's an existing problem in the relationship and it starts to heal and there's healing and this can be an intimate, this could be a friendship, this could be a work relationship, and people start to have a greater sense of communication. Obviously, in an intimate relationship, there's going to be a closeness, and a professional relationship, a community, a culture, etc.
An ease,
a flow, right? But that becomes different. It's a different way of being in those said relationships. Your subconscious is hanging around to try and protect you in the moment. I'm not saying it's protecting you, but its thing is, ooh, that's really different. I don't know if that's what you usually do. I'm just going to pull you right back to what you know, which is create an argument, fight, and get beyond it. Right. So if a relationship is used to fighting and making up and everything's great and there's that loop, your subconscious knows you do that well. If at work, your subconscious knows that you create drama and trauma and then make things better and excel and get a new deal, it will take you back to that. So we have to be so preciously present to what's happening, to really inquiring, like, all right, there's always a new way of being. There's always a new expansion. There's another level of connection, of support, of hearing, of speaking, and it's going to shake things up inside because it's new. And so the awareness of, okay, that's where I want to go. And on the pathway there, I might feel a little bit uncomfortable, or it might ping internally that I'm not safe because it's not what I usually do. So the awareness part is key. If we move into, okay, what do we do about this subconscious? Awareness is key to all of your moves, the way you receive information, the way you react, and the way you respond. Because you will know if you're reacting and you're responding, and you're going to start to hold things up in your life. So when you're aware of how you take something and how you respond, you're going to know if you're starting that fight or if you're not doing, everything in your business to move the numbers or to get that promotion. You'll be aware of it.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes people start fights for the attention.
Oh, absolutely. And because it's a way of being.
Yeah.
They know how to get the attention that way.
Yeah. But it sabotages the true intimacy.
Of course.
In any relationship.
If it's sustainable, it won't be sustainable in a healthy way. And usually it won't be sustainable.
Right. So awareness, right? The awareness of, I understand. I mean, that's such a key piece in everything, right? It's like the first step is just paying attention.
Paying attention. Yeah. Our advantage really does lie in our ability to be aware and to be present.
In a more specific way, like what do people look for to be aware of?
I like to ask questions of just if you find yourself not getting the result that you want, or if you've set a goal or an intention and you're getting sidetracked and distracted and disrupted, you've got to ask your own brain a question, because when our brain gets asked a question, it will usually pause. And that is usually like, all right, why would I do that? Why am I stopping? Why am I allowing the distraction without making it wrong? Right? It's just a simple question. Why would I do that? And you'll hear something. You'll know something about why you're doing it. It might be, I'm a little bit afraid of moving forward, or I'm not comfortable, or maybe I think I don't know enough, or whatever. But we've got to ask why.
You said something really important, not making it wrong. There's a really common question that I think you get too. Like I know I get it a lot is, they hear us talk about these things, or people hear us talk about these things, and they're like, well, you're a human being. Like, aren't you a human being? Like, can't you just be a human being?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, yes, that's the short answer.
And
is yes.
Human beings are quite remarkable in what we can do and who we can be.
That is also true. Very, very true. None of this is about, being perfect and never having the things, never sabotaging yourself. It's not even about that. It's really just about paying closer attention, being more aware, and getting yourself before you really get off track.
Right. There's a big difference between, oh my gosh, I stopped, I got distracted, I can't believe I did that energy, versus, wow, well, where do I maybe not feel safe, or maybe I'm not feeling loved, or I'm just scared of the advancement that I potentially could create in my business. Like, just asking that question without a lot of charge to it will provide answers.
Yeah.
But once we get into the, I can't believe I did that wrong and whatever, you're beating yourself up, and it's a karmic loop that's going to bring you down, not rise you up.
Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes I've been noticing this a lot recently, is there's an element of guilt.
Yeah.
Around that. You feel guilty or ashamed because you tried to do something and it didn't work out, or you failed at it, or you saw it, either in the moment or in retrospect, how you really sabotage yourself. You're like, oh, I was doing so good, and then I did X, Y, and Z. Speaking to the awareness too, David Nagel has a really cool way of talking about this that I always really appreciate. He talks about it as your stopping strategy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. I've heard him talk about that before, and he's like, well, what's your stopping strategy?
What's your sabotaging strategy?
Yeah. It's like, how do you go about it? I had this question asked to me one time. I was sitting down and, setting up a new business and mapping it all out and kind of getting an idea of like, well, what can this be? And my partner asked me that very question. She's like, all right, like, how are you going to screw it up? And
Ouch.
it took, it was said in a kind of funny way, let's more in an inviting way of saying, well, let's, catastrophize here together for a minute. How are we going to screw it up? And it didn't take long at all to tick through the pieces of like, okay, well, maybe this thing won't work out, and then I'll start to feel this way, and then I'll do that, and then I'll do that. And it was really funny. In about 2 minutes, I had laid out my whole stopping strategy around it. And what we did was we came down with like 3 things to really pay attention to and to keep myself in so that we keep everything flowing in the right direction, to just keep it that simple. Cause when you're in a stopping strategy, one of the ones that I've noticed a lot is like your brain starts to like really get cluttered up. And so if you don't have like really, really, really simple things to bring you out of that, you just get stuck in your head trying to figure it out.
For sure. It's a bit what we talked about in the last episode on listen to your energy. When the energy gets stuck, it's like, you're there, and it's really, that's a stop. That's a full stop.
Totally.
And that's a self-sabotage or inner conflict, or whatever it is, just like boom, anchored in, no one's moving. So, being able to have that awareness and without a negative emotional charge on yourself is really important. And the other thing I like to share with people is get clear on what you want. If something isn't happening, if you're like, oh, I just keep getting distracted, I don't do this, come back to point 1. Is that what you really want? Really? Because maybe the inner conflict is actually with your own desire. You think, how many times do we desire something according to what somebody else thinks we should be desiring, according to what somebody else thinks we should be doing? And if that's not in alignment with what you desire or you think you should be doing, there's going to be an inner conflict, and you'll find a way to slow down or stop or make it so heavy. So getting back to your truth, because when we light up with our own truth and our own purpose, there's a natural momentum and a natural, propulsion forward that can allow us to sail past the doubts and the worries and the things, because it is so compelling.
Yeah. There's one more nuance to that too, is like, even if it is the right thing for you, you can put way too much importance on that desire itself.
For sure. The attachment piece.
Yeah. And get really wrapped into that part of it. So even if it is the right thing, it becomes far, far too big a deal. Right. And then the mind, that makes the mind will find a way out of that as well.
Right. And I've also seen with my clients who are perfectionists, that in and of itself can be a self-sabotage or definitely an inner conflict, because they want things to be perfect. And so it's this, sometimes you and I talk about that over potentializing of energy on it, and then it never really moves because it's not yet perfect.
Yeah.
So you're perfect as you are. We might not always create something that's perfect, but if we don't create it, it's really going to get stuck. Yeah.
Yeah. It wrecks creativity. It wrecks the project. It wrecks the brilliance of the idea itself, because it just gets usually just gets over tweaked, Yeah. So many things that come from that. A long time ago, we did an episode, excellence versus perfection.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody can find that episode in the archives. Good luck. Good luck to you. Definitely let us know where you find it.
Find it, put in the show notes.
But yeah, that's a super important part of it too. And that can be such a big sabotager, because, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
Not good enough. Not quite yet. I don't want anybody to see it. I don't want to hit the launch button or hit the send button or hit the...
It'll really suck if you're waiting for a very long time for it to be perfect and never do it.
What's sad to me about that, I've certainly seen myself do this with projects of my own, where it has held back for that reason of like, oh, there's something more, there's something more, there's something more. And then the energy drains out of the project itself, and it loses all of its sparkle and it misses its moment.
Right.
And then it just goes to the graveyard of just another idea. And it's not for lack of a good idea. It's more just because it never got birthed properly.
Yeah. So just to kind of summarize here, this whole self-sabotage, what's happening is somewhere inside there's a conflict of either values or a place where we humans we might have a fear of losing love or connection or what people are going to think and all of these things. Your go-to is the awareness of where you slow down, where you stop, and ask yourself those questions. Why am I stopping? What am I worried about? What am I afraid of? Or what's in front of me that maybe I don't really want to do or receive? And then dialing it back to the very thing that you do want, energizing it with that soul purpose, belief and energy, and then take action, because action as well will help you get through and beyond those moments of self-sabotage.
So first, I would say we did the series on the big leap. Mm-hmm. Great place to take a little bit more, not necessarily in-depth look, but a little bit different perspective on this conversation. So that's a really great place to start. That was not too long ago, actually. So you should be able to find that.
Put it in the show notes.
Yeah. And then one of the most important things I've found is that trying to solve self-sabotage by yourself is extremely difficult.
It can be painful.
Really, really challenging. You wind up just forcing yourself in certain ways. And then, you're the last one. When you're in self-sabotage, you're usually the last one to know, So, it's that objective perspective is really important. So what's a good place for the people to, get started and to have a little support around this?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that has definitely helped me and all of my clients is the ultimate life tool to know who you are and what you are. Because once you know that, it's just such a different bandwidth of knowledge. So, Nick, I know you have that assessment on our site. How do people do that?
The best way to do that is it's actually on my site. It's nickhansinger.com/know yourself.
Know yourself. Yeah. It's a great, great tool. So I highly recommend that. Of course, we both have courses and coaching and all that sort of thing that you're welcome to reach out. hello@illuminationpodcast.com. My favorite is the School of Prosperous Thought.
School of Prosperous Thought. Yeah. You go into a lot of that there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's super cool.
Yeah. And illuminated thought for today?
Illuminated thought for the day is it's okay for you to be human.
I'm going to add on to that.
Okay.
And being human may also be that you are remarkable. All right,
maybe,
everyone.
You think? Maybe just a little bit.
Absolutely, for sure. Let's just tie it up. You're human and you're remarkable. So go do what you want to do.
That's an illuminated thought right there.
All right, everyone. Much love. Please share this episode with someone who you think might appreciate it. And we are so loving having you here listening to Illumination Podcast with Nick and KISMA. And until next time, namaste. Hey, thanks for jamming with us today. And if you enjoy Illumination Podcast, please go ahead and share it with someone you love. Give us a rating, review, download our podcast. And remember, you can find us at illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. Talk to you soon. Namaste.